Good morning. Welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation on fluency today. I have a couple of videos. So based on some of the questions that were in the feedback from day one, there's definitely a lot of questions related to why kids are not understanding, and it seems to be a little more pronounced. I think the pandemic there's a group of kids that really missed a lot of that relationship stage, so now they're having issues with computation. So I went back to I teach the math methods class at Penn State, and I have a couple of short videos that show progressions. And I'm going to show a progression for number counting. And the reason I'm going to bring number counting into play here is a lot of issues that kids have when they're developing strategies for computation are based on the issues with counting, not really computation. So there's a bridge that occurs when kids go from in the realm of computation, they go from counting to actually computing. And there are a couple subtle areas that teachers aren't really focused on in this progression. Now, kindergarten teachers are, but the issue now is a lot of these kindergarten kids missed, and now they're in first and second grade. And now second grade teachers are not sort of living in this early number sense counting piece, are kind of having some difficulty. So I've got two I want to show, and then I'll give you the link because there's 5 videos. There's some on multiplication, division, and then fractions. And I really, my students, when I use them with it, they really begin to see that math, and I think teachers inherently know this, that math isn't like do this and then all of a sudden that's going to fix something. There's actually a pretty well defined progression, but teachers tend not to see progressions as much as they are focused on what they're doing in their particular grade level. So we'll get to that sort of up front, but then we're going to get into the strategy. Before we get to strategies, I want to kind of do a little bit of a review from yesterday. So what I want you to do with this is I want you to do this without notes. All right. So I want you to try to do this from a sort of a recall stage. So this idea of not looking at your notes and trying to recall something is actually a very good retention strategy. So once kids learn things, if to help them retain it, doing these free recall activities can be very beneficial. Just get a piece of scratch paper or something on your computer if you want to do notes. And I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to 15 seconds per question. So basically just almost like that game of when I say garbage, what word comes to mind? Can. So when you see the sentence, just write down whatever you can remember about it in a short burst, and we'll go through these questions and kind of review some of the topics from yesterday. So let me share my screen. All right, so thinking about yesterday. All right, so don't look at your notes, honor system here. Just trying to kind of do your best to recall the information from this. So the first thing we'll talk about, shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, is, maybe if I get my computer working, here we go. Working memory is an important consideration for fluency because. So just jot down what is coming to mind with that. It's important because. I've got you on a timer, so keep myself on track today. Okay, that was 30 seconds. So just stop, no matter how much you wrote, stop. And I want you to look, kind of think about what you wrote there. And I want to give yourself a rating. How well are you with this understanding of working memory and how it interacts with fluency? 1, not there yet. 4, super strong and have a good understanding of working memory and fluency, and then a 2, 3 in between there. Just give yourself a rating. All right, let's go to the next question. What is the difference between fluency and automaticity? Again, whatever comes to mind, just throw it out there. Bonus if you use working memory in your answer, or your response, I should say. Okay, stop. And again, give yourself a rating. Now, I know these are short bursts. That's what we're looking here, not comprehensive 10 minutes, just short bursts. So give yourself a rating. Again, 1, little, not real sure, 4, very comfortable with this. And then the next 4, I'll give you a couple of minutes. So think about the progressions of fluency that we talked about yesterday. There were 4 of them. See if you can list them, and then maybe either give an example of one of those or a description of them. And I'm gonna put you on a timer for about 2 minutes on this. So I'll give you 30 seconds per stage. I'm going to mute myself because it'll be hard for me to stay quiet for 2 minutes. Now, if you've exhausted kind of your recall on those 4, you can just stop and give yourself a rating for just the total stages here. All right. So we're starting off with a do now. This is your classic math class do now. All right, and the last one. This is related to the key ingredients, non-negotiable, negotiable ingredients. There were 3 non-negotiable ingredients that we need to embed in practice for it to be more purposeful and targeted. So go ahead and I'll give you 30 seconds on this. What were those 3 things? All right, now that I got your brains turning again, give yourself a rating for that. So what I did there is a little strategy that is called practice, test retrieval. It's emerging as one of the most powerful techniques to help with retention. So in other words, once kids have learned something, if you do these kinds of activities, now I wouldn't do 10 questions with kids, but I would do one. But with adults, I did more. But the idea with this retention is what we're finding is free recall, like giving kids a chance to try to recall, even if they get it right or wrong, it almost doesn't matter, but it's that recall that seems to be very powerful, because what's happening, kind of continuing our conversation from yesterday, when I'm having you recall, I'm forcing you to get out of your working memory and go into your long-term memory where information is housed and try to pull it out. Even if you can't pull it out, that exercise is showing that it strengthens kids' ability to retain information, especially if it's followed by feedback. So we're going to do the feedback here in a second. It's also short bursts. So it's not like I'm going to give you 10 minutes. It's like a 30, 60-second kind of piece where they just kind of recall whatever they can remember. Then we give feedback. Then the other element is that we try to get the kids to rate themselves. Now, I gave you a number, like 1, 2, 3, or 4. With little kids, you can do thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, that kind of scenario. Some teachers even have like a happy face, a medium face, and then a confused face, and then kids put themselves in one of those faces. But doing these kinds of short brain exercises with those features of a free recall, feedback, rating, and low stakes, not graded, is very powerful to retention. Now, not really for facts, like what we're talking about today for fluency, but just to help kids remember things. All right, so that's that. All right, now we got our brains thinking. Let's get into the feedback stage. Now, once we go over the feedback, I'm going to ask you to revisit your rating to see if you want to raise it or lower it. So maybe you remembered more than what you thought, or maybe you didn't remember as much as what we're hoping for. So again, this idea of regulating their learning is very, very important. So I threw in a little extra retention strategy in there, Mark. I hope that's all right. All right, so let's take a look at the first question here. So there's obviously a lot of things, but I don't know if this image came to mind. But as you're looking at your response, in relationship to that question is, in relation to the question is, did you, in your response, did you say something about working memory, long-term memory? Working memory has a limit or a capacity. Once it gets overloaded, did you use the word overload? Give yourself a check if you use the word overload. Once your working memory gets overloaded, learning kind of comes to a grind. So fluency is trying to offload. If you gave an offload, if you use the word offload, give yourself a bonus. Giving offload to free up capacity. So if you had any of that in that area, then I think you did fairly well. So working memory and fluency are important because fluency allows working memory to be freed up or diverted or used for other things, and which then will allow for learning to occur. So when kids become more fluent, they're using less of their working memory. Now look at your rating. Based on kind of that feedback I just gave you, do you want to keep it the same or do you want to raise it? This is something you decide. Maybe you raise it half a point, maybe you raise it a point or lower it. It's up to you. Kind of evaluate how you did on that. All right, next question was like fluency and automaticity. So fluency has two parts. So you should have had something in your response about fluency is made up of two parts: accuracy and speed. Accuracy must develop first through understanding, relationship, and strategies. We want kids to have flexibility in terms of the strategies that they're using to get the correct answer. And we want them to develop some efficiency with that. That's fluency. Automaticity is when you're answering without thought. So that was a big without thought. Now, I said bonus points if you use working memory in there. So automaticity is answering without using your working memory, or limited. So it's it's retrieved from long-term memory, and it's not bogging down your working memory. Now, as a rule of thumb, most people will define automaticity as no longer than 2 seconds. So kind of look at what you recalled and determine, were you pretty close to that conversation? Did you have those elements? Maybe you had a few extra ones. If you were missing elements, make sure you add them in there. But that's the difference. Fluency and automaticity I see as two very distinct things in math, but they're getting mixed up. So I hear a lot of teachers talking about fluency when they're really referencing automaticity. And then I hear a lot of teachers kind of saying automaticity when they're really in this fluency piece. So just make sure there's some subtle differences and parse them out. Now, anytime I talk with a middle school or a high school teacher, they are almost always talking about automaticity. When they say their kids don't know the facts, it's almost always they don't know the facts quickly. Now, yes, there are some kids that still are having some accuracy issues for sure. But most of the time, middle school and high school teachers, when they're having a conversation about a student, they're essentially focusing on this idea of automaticity. They're just too slow. All right. Now, the stages, 4 stages. Give yourself a pat on the back if you had understanding, relationship, fluency, and automaticity. So if you recall the 4 stages. For your description of understanding, you should have said something about students the goal of understanding is that they are able to use models to create sentences, or sentences to create models. So essentially, it's just understanding an operation. What does it mean to add or subtract? What does it mean to multiply or divide? Accuracy and speed are of no importance in the understanding stage. In the relationship stage, this is where we're looking at connections within and across operations. So this is where kids are really beginning to see the inner workings of the operations. In fact, families are a big part of this. Doubles, they sort of begin to learn the computational properties. So what happens when you're adding a 0 and you're adding a 1? Sets are being combined and things of that nature. And like I said yesterday, number 2, that relationship, that occurs at all levels of math. And sometimes we rush a little bit too fast through there. Stage 3, fluency. What I really wanted, what I really hope you wrote down was there's kind of 2 branches of fluency. The first one is we teach strategies so that kids get a correct answer. And we teach a variety of strategies. And those strategies are sort of building upon relationships, the relationship stage. Speed, quickness, efficiency, effectiveness, strategicness is not a focus initially. It's get the kids strategies that they understand how to use. Number talks fits in really well in stage 2 and 3, in my opinion. Actually, stage 1 too, but really 2 and 3 is where number talks can be very, very beneficial. Once kids learn the strategies, then they start to get more efficient. So they know which ones are better to use at certain times. They know how to use them, and they are using them faster. So they begin to internalize them. Now, there's a lot you could have put into all of these. I'm sort of hitting the highlights that I want the takeaways for. If you put more, thumbs up. Automaticity. This is the last stage. So hopefully there was something in there about the last stage. We don't want to rush this stage. It comes out of fluency, but it doesn't not necessarily happen just sort of automatically. We need to have that purposeful practice. All right. So that is okay, we have one more question. That was the big piece from yesterday right there. Then the last, this is where we're now moving kind of into the automaticity stage. We want to have 3 critical elements: opportunities to respond, targeted practice, and immediate feedback. Opportunities to respond means that all kids are responding. So that's where you have to really pay attention to whatever the activity is. Is it a turn by turn, or is it everybody's responding kind of scenario? But within that, they're getting repeated opportunities on the same facts. That is the key piece. So that each fact isn't just done one time, it's done multiple times. Targeted, that's where you're getting into this chunk. So if you wrote any description about the targeted practice, that's where you're sort of controlling the total number of facts. And you're paying attention as the teacher, saying, okay, these are the ones I'm going to target, and it's going to be 3 to 4. That's our primary goal. And then I'm going to mix in some ones that they already know. But the targeted practice is key, is that chunk is critical. And I should have said this yesterday, strategic learners, they already tend to do that. So you have these kids that are organized in their learning. When they begin to practice facts, they will actually begin to say or regulate, go, oh, I don't know 6 times 7. I need to practice that one extra. And then they do that on their own. Kids that are not strategic, especially kids with learning difficulties, they're not making that kind of recognition, and therefore they're not getting that extra practice. So this is really a key piece, is that second, number 2. And then 3 is the feedback. So we're going to get into feedback today. We didn't really get into that. We were mostly on 1 and 2. Today, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this idea of feedback. All right, now kind of look at your ratings for all of these. And is there, think about yourself. Is there any area that I was really good at that I didn't think I was that good at? Or is there an area where maybe you still have some questions? And before I move in, I'll just sort of open it up to anyone who wants to throw in any kinds of questions in the chat, or unmute and ask me a question kind of anything that we covered yesterday. More clarification, something that just isn't sitting right. But any kinds of questions from the content that we covered yesterday, this would be a good opportunity to ask that, either in the chat or feel free to unmute. But he's going to be shy today. I could have been that good of a teacher yesterday that there's no questions. Okay, great. I like it. All right. So moving on today. All right, so we are going to get back to this incremental rehearsal piece, and this is sort of continuing on with that question. So when you look at incremental rehearsal, I have it as 6 steps. There's really 3 steps to incremental rehearsal. I would say steps 4 and 5 here are kind of for anything you're going to do. Enough time, record keeping, motivational procedures. But these are the critical steps. Now, I have these in the context of incremental rehearsal, but these should be applied kind of in almost all the strategies. Is this idea of chunking versus a randomly practicing of everything. So as we're thinking about this, now we're going to talk about, like, okay, so I've got my practice activity set up. I've picked 3 to 4 facts that are unknown, so not automatic. I've picked 3 or 4 that are automatic. I've mixed them together. I've kind of got this plan. So now I want to actually do this with my students. Now, this is where it's sort of going to be very classroom specific. So if you're an interventionist, you're going to have a smaller set of kids. You could actually do group practice or individual practice. If you are a a general ed classroom and you got 25 or 30 kids, then there's some other logistical challenges that you have to play in the part there. So when you get the kids practicing, that's what we're going to get into now. So they've got their cards, or they got their cards or their worksheets. We'll sort of, I'm going to describe this in the context of flashcards, because there were a lot of people yesterday said flashcards. But I don't want you to think it's only flashcards. We'll just kind of, for the ease of explaining, we'll do this with flashcards. So I got my cards set up. I got my class. So I want the kids to practice this. So you have options here. You can just say, all right, silent practice to yourself. And then the kids practice with themselves. That's fine. The issues with that is there's no feedback and you don't know if they're actually practicing. You may say, practice with a partner. So now they're going to partner up and the kids are going to practice. So everybody decides which partner is going to practice first. You have 2 minutes and then their partner will show them the cards and they just practice in a partner group. Or maybe you have it on a worksheet and they're solving the problem. So however you want to do it, that's what it's going to look like. But this is what we're wanting. This is what we're going to want the kids to do in this, is to say the fact, if at all possible. So you can say the fact, you can write the fact, or you can say the fact quietly. For the vast majority of kids, writing and saying it quietly are just fine. For that struggling kid, so think about a kid with a learning disability, or he doesn't have a learning disability, but there's struggling occurring. Verbalizing the fact is going to be beneficial. Now, we're starting to talk about the struggling kids. So this is where I wanted to insert the at least one of the videos. I don't want to show like 30 minutes of videos, but the first video here that I want to show is really going to get into the progression piece. So this, let me see if I can put this in the chat. I will put this link in the chat so that you can have this for to look at later. But I want to show, the first video I'm going to show is the progression of early counting, because this is really laying the groundwork for computation. So if you're in, usually this is reserved for kindergarten teachers, but struggling kids in first grade and second grade, what we're now seeing is they have a lot of these issues. So we're going to watch this video. If I can make sure I click everything, and it's going to take you through the progression, and it's going to hit on a couple of key areas that I really want you to pay attention. Now, if you're an older grade level teacher, zero in on this too, because you're going to probably see some of this even with your own students. So they use a lot of there's a lot of fancy terms in there that we don't really see or use, but the key elements, those last two pieces of cardinality and that idea of conservation, those are really the two critical elements that are leading into computation. So there was a lot of folks yesterday saying, my kids don't understand, they have issues. You can see clearly in that progression where some of these issues might come up. And I really think it's this idea of cardinality, recognizing and then decomposing. If you think about the vast majority of strategies that we're teaching kids that aren't a counting strategy, they often have what I call a regrouping feature. What is that idea of decomposing numbers. What are these numbers made up of? And when kids are having difficulties with that, they really are struggling with that idea of what cardinality, in other words, what is making up that particular number. So I see Nancy put in there that she's seeing a lot of parallels to reading and sort of the 5 big ideas. I agree that the main difference is in reading, those 5 big areas have been very well fleshed out and researched in depth in terms of how they impact reading, what they are, how they develop, And then we have very, very specific strategies to address those when kids are struggling. That is where the research in math is just very much underdeveloped, where these things are just not at the tips of teachers' knowledge. I think they're more the activities are. Like, I'm sure some of you are like, oh, I didn't know it was called that, but I do X, Y, and Z that fits right in there. So that's sort of the idea in terms of that. So that there's 5 of these videos. I would like to show one more if that's okay. I can't see anybody's faces. I don't know if you're falling asleep on these videos, but I watch these videos over and over, and it helps me really see how kids are progressing. So you should, there's a link. Mark put a link in the chat box up above. He'll throw it in again so that you can watch these again. But I want to watch one more. Now, the one we're going to watch now is addition and subtraction. So Sarah has a question like, is there more research being done on this? Yes and no. Here's what's going to happen, or here's what's happening. The pandemic not just interfered with teaching, but it also interfered with research, because we can't come into schools and do research during that 2-year period. But there are more research that this is happening. All right, so we're going to watch one more. If there's no major objections to this. Okay, so the next one we're going to watch is addition and subtraction. Now, this is where you really are going to see how that relationship stage is moving into fluency. And when because there was a lot of people saying my kids don't know how, they can't add, they can't this. This is where you're going to really see that development. Oh, good. So Sarah's saying as an intermediate teacher. So yeah, as an intermediate teacher, this is clearly, these are things that we don't do normally. However, we now have a lot of kids coming in to intermediate that are missing some of these skills in particular. I do think like this idea of one-to-one correspondence and subitizing, I think that took a major hit with that when we went remote, because the kids could not really do it. Or the teacher couldn't see the kids do it, is what I should say. All right. I see some folks in there talking about C. What does the C stand for? That's the concrete. So any manipulative piece. But the key with the C, the R, and the A is that they are funneling towards the algorithm. And the language that you're using with the C and the R should match the language that's in the algorithm. So we have to be careful about making words up. Now, he said trading. Really, you shouldn't use that word. It should just be regrouping, period, because that's what's being used later on. Kids that don't have disabilities, they can easily make that jump. But kids that struggle, if you're spending all your time in the manipulatives calling it trading, and then in the algorithm you call it regrouping, that's going to be a problem for struggling kids. So you got to really make sure the language is consistent and the manipulatives align. So those were 2 videos that I wanted to show to really begin to get you thinking a little bit more about the progression. You know, our focus for our session, these 2 sessions, was more on that 4th stage, but I could just, a lot of the questions I was seeing in the chat yesterday and some of the questions in that review form, there was a lot more questions in understanding and relationship piece that I thought I just wanted to try to address. So there's a couple other videos on there. That would be something to check out. And, you know, we're watching kind of start to finish. Watch it, think about it, look at your program, what activities are aligning with these, then start thinking about what kids need these kinds of activities. Now, with older kids, you know, this is always a problem. Like, how far back do I go? And then are the kids going to, you know, be turned off by the fact I'm going way back and they think it's babyish? I mean, we run into that in reading all the time. So it really, for the older kids, you want to move through the concrete quickly. Sometimes some people will say just do the R and the A, but it sort of depends on the kid. Move through the concrete, and the way you kind of soften that, oh, this is for baby stuff, is by you're really leading to that algorithm. The babyish is coming from they're using the manipulatives. And then the other thing is, you know, sometimes they need it. whether they like it or not. And it's going to have to be how you set up your classroom and the conversations that you have with the kids. But you want to move quickly with the older kids to get them more at the abstract level. Did anyone have any questions or comments? I hope I find these videos helpful. And I was a high school teacher and a middle school teacher. So I'm hoping that these videos you found helpful no matter what level of a teacher you are when you're thinking about fluency and understanding the operations. But anybody have any comments or questions while we're at it here? So it looks like there's another AV MAR training. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like that might be a resource that Amanda has put in the chat. Mark, is that a Kentucky thing or?
It's not a Kentucky thing, but a lot of teachers in Kentucky have been trained. It's Advantage Math Recovery, and it's based a lot on the Robert Wright work,
Okay.
and so on. And it goes in depth into those stages, that progression through counting, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and so on.
Okay, good. It's always good to see multiple outlets kind of saying the same thing. That's good confirmation. Okay, all right. So let's go kind of back, go back to our automaticity focus and setting up some purposeful practice with that. So Mark I don't know, throw that link in there one more time, just so that everybody has it. So I'm gonna go here. All right, so progressions. What I really like about progressions, it helps teachers see maybe beyond their grade level or behind their grade level, which will better help them see where their students need the most assistance. All right, so let's get back to incremental rehearsal. So this was where we were ending off yesterday. In all the fact practice, we're looking for this cycle. All right, now remember, if we're doing these activities, you are saying that the kids are good with understanding, relationship, and have strategies. So we're not doing this unless kids are, one, able to get the right answer, have a strategy or several strategies to do that, and then they can explain the strategy. Now, not just how they do the strategy, but, well, why did you do the strategy here? So now we're trying to get them to rely less on the strategy, more on sort of this automatic retrieval piece. So this is kind of what we're looking for, is the student sees the fact. So it can be, think about on a card, on a computer, on a worksheet, somebody says it, the student answers, computes and answers, and we're looking for this piece here from when they see it to when they answer it to be in about 2 seconds. Then they're going to get feedback. So this is what we're going to talk about here. Now, in the best case scenario, now I'm saying this in terms of like the best case scenario. Obviously, this is going to be dependent upon the students that you have in your classroom and the structure of your classroom and so forth. The student really should say the fact if at all possible. So that's the disadvantage of the computer, is they're typing it and they're not saying it. So if you're going to do a computer practice, have them on it for 4 to 6 weeks, look at their progress. And then if they're not making progress, that's where you have to think about potentially switching up the practice. So I want to talk about the correction procedure here. Now we're going to, well, I don't know if I'll try this, we'll see. So when a student makes a mistake, so the only way that this can happen is if somebody is practicing with the student. So obviously it can be done by the teacher, but it can also be done by peers. You just have to teach the kids how to do this. So when the student says the incorrect answer, what you're going to do is you're going to stop the student, and then you say the correct answer. So student makes mistakes, stop, you miss that one, then you say it. Then you and the student say it. Then the student says it. then maybe you say it one more time. So this correction procedure is called part firming. So you stop the student when he makes a mistake, you say it, you both say it, then the student says it one more time, maybe even you say it one more time, and then you go back 3. Now I'll show you what this looks like. And then I'm going to ask for a volunteer out of the audience. So let's say here are the facts that we're practicing. So, and I'm happy to do this one-on-one with the student, or I'm doing it in a small group. So the students are going to read the fact. So they're going to say 4 times 3 equals 12. That's what we want. And they're going to move across. So this could be flashcards or it could be on a worksheet, but they're saying the fact out loud. They're not writing it. They're just saying it. They get to this one and they make a mistake. All right. So they're 4 times 3 is 12. 8 times 2 is 16. 6 times 7 is 42. 3 times 4 is 15. Part firming comes into play. You say, stop, you've missed this one. 3 times 4 is 12. Say it with me. And then you both say 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, you say it. And then the student says 3 times 4 is 12. Here's the part firming part. Then you have the student go back to and start here and go back that way. So 3 times 4 is 12. Good. You say it. The student says 3 times 4 is 12. Say, okay, go back to this one. 8 times 2 is 16. 6 times 7 is 42. And then they get back to the one they missed within 3. Now I want to stop for a second. So they miss it, you do the correction, and then you go back to. Why am I having the student go back to facts? You can put this in the chat or unmute. Why am I having go back 2? Why am I not having them go back 5? Why do I have them just move forward? Why don't I, if it's on cards, put that in the missed pile? Working memory. So what about working memory? Definitely working memory, but that's going to be the catchphrase. Anytime I ask a question, say working memory, you got a good chance of getting the right answer. We don't want to overload it. Okay, good. There, Diana said it. Working memory, most people can handle 3. So I want to go back 2 so that when he gets to the one he missed, the correction is still housed in his working memory. Remember how you could hold 3? Most of us held 5, but for kids, let's keep it on the 3 end. So that way, when you get back to it, the correction is still in the working memory. If we wait to the end, or we put it in a pile of the errors, by the time the kid get back to it, that correction is gone. Everybody, that is like a key piece. Now, same thing can be done in reading. So instead of having those facts on the screen, think of a sentence. And they come to a word they miss, you can have them try to sound it out. If not, you say the word, have them go back to the beginning of the sentence and reread it. So it's the same thing. And this is a constant time delay, very similar. Melissa had put in there. It's a very similar strategy. Now, again, this can only happen in a certain situation. And that means then that situation is the student has to be practicing with someone that knows this procedure. Now, I think extra math and reflex math have it built in where it cycles back. So some of the computer programs are building this in. But if you're independent practice, this procedure can't happen. So this is a little more challenging to do, but unless you are an interventionist with a small group of kids, or you pull a small group of kids, you have a teaching assistant, student teacher, or you have the kids partner practice. Paraprofessionals can certainly do this. But I just want to say rocket math, that was brought up yesterday in the chat. I don't know who said it, but rocket math, they are designed as a peer-to-peer practice, and that they teach the kids to do this strategy, and the kids can do this strategy. They do it really well, actually. They'll say stop and they'll act like the teacher, and they do this really well. Now I need a volunteer. Does anyone want to volunteer? I'm going to pick Mark if no one volunteers, but I need a volunteer that I will model this strategy for. Anybody?
Come on, somebody step up.
Come on,
We
poor
got
Mark.
this.
I will.
All right. So what's your first name? I see that you
Carolyn.
Carolyn. Okay. So Carolyn, I'm going to have you say the facts just like we did. And I want you to miss one of them, miss the 3 times 4, and then I'll take you through the correction procedure. So kind of everybody sees exactly how it goes. So I'm going to, let me share my screen. For some reason, I've lost the screen with where I can see everybody, but that's all right. So Carolyn, you see the PowerPoint, right?
Yes, I do.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to model this. When she makes the mistake, I'm going to do, let me get my pointer, laser pointer, so you can see it. All right. So I'll use a laser pointer to point you to each of the facts. I want you to read the fact. 4 times 3 is 12. Say the, and then when you get to this one, miss it. So let me go back here to this. I'll leave that so it prompts you. All right, Carolyn, are you ready? Do you see the first fact we're going to start with?
Yes, I do.
All right, go ahead.
4 times 3 is 12. 8 times 2 is 16. 6 times 7 is 42. 3 times 4 is 18.
Stop. You've missed this one. 3 times 4 is 12. Say it with me, Carolyn. 3 times 4
is 12.
12. Good. 3 times 4 is 12.
4 is 12.
You say it.
3 times 4 is 12.
All right, we're going to go back here to 8 times 2 and start over. Go ahead.
8 times 2 is 16. 6 times 7 is 42.
Now think about this
3
one.
3 times 4 is 12.
Good. Keep going.
5 times 8 is 40. And 4 times 3 is 12.
All right, good. Everybody, let me stop sharing. Everybody sees that. If this, all right, everybody see that? It's that simple. Now we did that without flashcards. Now, if you had flashcards, if I'm showing her the flashcards, I would have to keep 3 times 4 out. As soon as I did 2, I'd bring it back up. The key is you want her to hit that fact that she missed, and I corrected her, be within 3 opportunities. All right. Okay, Melissa, you're getting ahead of me on this one. So Melissa asked, what if there's a delayed response? So you would do the same correction. So I need another volunteer. Carolyn, thank you very much. You did a great job. Can I get another volunteer? I know I'm pushing my luck with this. Sarah, are you unmuting to volunteer for me?
Yeah, I don't mind volunteer.
Okay, so this time, Sarah, when you get to 3 times 4, I want you to say 3 times 4, but I do not want you to answer the question. Just kind of pause. All right?
Okay.
All right, let me share my screen. Okay, here we go. Ready? Sarah, right?
Yes.
All right, start with 4 times 3.
4 times 3 is 12. 8 times 2 is 16. 6 times 7 is 42. 3 times 4 is...
Stop. You've missed this one. 3 times 4 is 12. Say it with me.
3 times 4 is 12.
12. Good. 3 times 4 is 12. You say it.
3 times 4 is 12.
Good. Now let's go back to 8 times 2.
8 times 2 is 16. 6 times 7 is 42. 3 times 4 is 12.
Okay, good. So that is answering Melissa's question. Is she didn't answer within 2 seconds, so it's an error, and you treat it as an error. And everybody see that? Now there's a third error that might occur, and this is the one that makes teachers the most uncomfortable. Does anybody know what that third is? So there's the saying it wrong, there's the hesitation, There is a third error. Let's see if anyone can come up with that in the chat. This is the one that teachers don't like the most. So missing one they got, so if they miss one that they got right, you still correct it. Reading it wrong, yeah, that can happen. Skipping, but that's not a big deal. Self-correction, if they, okay, good. So if they self-correct within 2 seconds, we let it go. So if a student says 3 times 4 is 12, then you let it go. Flipping the factors, yeah, you don't want them flipping the factors, but there's another error with the, nobody's getting it yet. Skip it all together, no. All right, I can't really show this one when I show my screen, but everybody can see me, hopefully. Here's the next error that can occur that is corrected. All of those things definitely can happen, but those are minor. The error is they start to use a strategy. So I'm the student. 4 times 3 is 12. 8 times 2 is 16. 6 times 7 is 42. 3 times 4, 3, 6, 9. That should be corrected. Now that's where teachers don't like. Why am I saying we should stop them and correct them on this one? So if they use a strategy, right, because our goal for our output from the student is answering it within 2 seconds. So we want to begin to push the mental math. We're trying to transition the student off of the strategy. Now, this is where teachers get really uncomfortable. We've just spent a whole bunch of time teaching the kid the strategy. Now we're saying we don't want them to use the strategy. It's very much like the reading progression. When we teach kids to sound out a word, say it slowly, say it fast, eventually we want the sounding out loud to start to decrease. So in this case, if they do any strategy that's going to take them longer than 2 seconds, we want to correct it. Now, maybe you don't say you missed it, maybe to say stop. 3 times 4 is 12. Say it with me. 3 times 4 is 12. So that's the one that teachers are uncomfortable with. And I understand that because we just spent all this time teaching it. But the idea of automaticity is we're trying to push mental math. If we keep letting the kids use the strategies, they'll just keep using the strategies. And that's what we're trying to do. So you have to sort of be very careful. Gabrielle, that's a great analogy. I might have to steal that for some future sessions. It's kind of like riding a bike with the training wheels. If we never take the training wheels off or we don't begin to loosen them, then they're just going to keep using the training wheels. And again, don't interpret this as that counting on their fingers or using strategy is bad. That's not at all what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is we're trying to transition to a mental math focus for cognitive reasons. Now with the training wheels, you don't like put the training wheels on one day, pull them off, you gradually release them. And that's the idea behind this. Now, so those are the 3 errors that can occur. Saying it wrong, hesitating for longer than that 2.5 seconds, or beginning to use a strategy. Now, you will see as you do this, some kids get stuck. They want to use the strategy because it gets them the right answer, and they don't want to not use it because they're afraid they're not going to get the right answer. So this is a gradual process. But one way that you can really help the kids get off the strategy, and I should have had a slide with this, but I don't, is that you actually put the answer underneath the fact. So 3 times 4, that's the one they're stuck on. You actually would write 12 underneath of it or write it on the card. So when the kid comes to that, they're just reading it, and that will help them commit it to memory and get them off of being reliant upon a strategy. But again, I just want to be very clear that strategies are important. We want kids to use them, but if we're at the automaticity stage, We're kind of trying to move them past that. So again, it's very much dependent upon your grade level that you are in.
Paul, one of the things that you'd said last summer when you were here is when the teacher is giving that feedback, sometimes teachers will say, no, Mark, the answer 4 times 3 is not 13,
Oh,
it's 12. You had said, don't say it that way. So can you talk about that?
Sure, great. Thanks for prompting me on that. So if you notice, when I did the correction, there was not a lot of extra verbiage. I just said, stop, you missed it. 3 times 4 is 12. It was very straightforward, right? There was not a lot of verbiage in there. What I sometimes see teachers doing is they say they almost do like a game show. So Mark, let's do the game show routine if you remember that. So say the wrong answer and I'll kind of take you through. So go ahead, just do 3 times 4 and give me the wrong answer.
3 times 4 is 13.
No, 3 times 4 is not 13. A little bit lower.
3 times 4 is 12.
3 times 4 is 12. Good. So basically, I turned it into a game show and the students are guessing. So that's the first thing. We don't want the guessing game, but the thing that's most detrimental is I repeated the incorrect answer. So he said 3 times 4 is 13. And I said, no, 3 times 4 is not 13. The problem is, what did the student just hear again? 3, 4, 13. So don't ever repeat the incorrect answer in this type of fact practice. It's kind of like reading. When a kid reads a word incorrectly, we don't really repeat the word incorrectly. We stop them and we tell them the word correctly. So just be careful that when you're doing this procedure that you are not repeating the incorrect answer and not adding a lot of verbiage. Keep it super streamlined. I will say that students do this really well. It takes about 2 or 3 days, 10 minutes, and they learn that correction procedure and they are really, really good at doing it. And then it generalizes, just be aware, it'll generalize into other areas. If you teach this to your students and you have a Mark in your class and you call him Mike, just get ready for Mike to go, stop. You missed that. My name is Mark. Say it with me, Mark. And they will do that strategy with you. All right, that's the part firming strategy. Does anybody have any questions on that strategy to correct students? Obviously, you can't do that unless you are one-on-one with the student or a group of 3 students, or you have taught your peers to do that with the students. I've seen it from 1st grade to 8th grade. All right, so that procedure that we just learned is called part firming. It's an error correction procedure that can be used if you have students practicing together and you taught the kids to do that strategy, or if you're doing it with a group. Now that can also be done with like 3, if you're thinking a U-shaped table with 3 kids, they're all answering the facts together. You can do the same thing. The key with the correction, again, is the cognitive piece by going back 3. We have to kind of break our habit of when they miss one, we correct them and just move on. That is really not cognitively based in terms of helping the kids. So recirculating back is very helpful with students as they are struggling with errors. So as we're continuing this, that is the incremental rehearsal piece here. Now, most often that is done with flashcards, but it can also be built into worksheets. So yesterday, multiple people said that they use Rocket Math, Extra Math, or Reflex Math. Rocket Math is really designed right around that, and it's sort of a paper pencil piece. There's no cards. The kids are just reading the facts off of a sheet.
Sorry, could you?
Whoops. Then the Extra Math is set up this way, and then Reflex has a lot of those elements built in. So when you are thinking about an activity for automaticity, remember stage 4 automaticity, what you want to look at the program or the activity for are these 3 features. Is there a chunk that is in that 3 to 4 range? Now remember, it can go less than 3. If you have really struggling kids, you can make it a chunk of 2. We actually had to do that with my daughter who has a learning disability. Second, look for multiple opportunities. Third, is there sort of a cycle? And then you're evaluating that particular activity based on these 3 key features. And it will sort of mirror that incremental rehearsal kind of technique. And again, you're always looking for these opportunities, targeted practice, and then that immediate feedback. Now, sometimes you're not going to be able to do that immediate feedback, especially if you decide to do pencil and paper practice. So the feedback's going to be a little bit delayed. Either way, it's still, we got to get the kids the feedback so they can make the corrections. But that's what we're looking for in all of the activities. And again, the reason you're doing something like this, and I really want to point this out, timing is critical on this. The goal for this is to offload working memory. So in kindergarten, automaticity really is not something I would worry about that much. Grade 1, I wouldn't even worry about automaticity either. If I am, I wouldn't do it until the second half of the year, and I'd only do it with select sums and differences. The benchmark or the grade level goals are generally end of 2nd grade for addition and subtraction, end of 3rd grade for multiplication and division. So those are the grade levels where these automaticity activities are going to come more into play. And then obviously in middle school, when you get into the upper grade levels, you're going to reduce which facts you focus on, and the focus should be on multiplication. And you are going to mostly be at that automaticity level unless you have made a determination that the student needs to go back and do some relationship activities. But I would make those quick and move them into strategies and so forth. Now, I don't know if I have any older teachers in here, but sometimes teachers about calculator use. These are separate. You can do automaticity practice and still let the kids use calculators. They're just not using the calculators in the automaticity practice activity. So, doing this doesn't mean there's no calculator use, and using calculators doesn't mean there's no automaticity. So sometimes teachers conflate them as being one or the other. They're actually not. A calculator is a tool, and use of the calculator should match the objective of the lesson. So if the lesson is problem solving and reasoning, then let them use calculators. If it's on a computing, then they shouldn't use calculators as much. So the idea is the automaticity piece will help them rely less on the calculator for basic facts and use that calculator more strategically later on. But again, the whole idea is that we are trying to offload working memory so that kids can better handle the content in math. And then the practice activities that we do are taking into account working memory and the limits and how much capacity and so forth. So the first one I want to talk about is cover, copy, compare. And I would assume that this is not necessarily a new activity for those of you. Maybe you haven't heard it. But cover, copy, and compare is a technique that's got quite a few utilities. It can be done in multiple ways. Like I said, it can be verbal, it can be written, it can be silent practice. So again, you have that, those are the things that you have flexibility with. The other thing that's nice about cover, copy, compare is it can become a self-independent activity. In other words, the kids can do it on their own. So you can set this up in morning work in a cover, copy, compare folder. It can be a station, it can be a center, but once kids know how to do it, they can just do it on their own. You just have to make sure they have the materials. But cover, copy, compare, it's an academic intervention. It's been used in other areas beside math. It's been used with spelling, sight words, vocabulary. It's also used it with math facts, but essentially the student is going to verbally rehearse a fact with the answer. then practice writing or saying it, and then checking it. So basically it's going to be a practice, either verbal, silent, or writing. Then they're going to check it, and it also has a correction procedure built in, not exactly part affirming, but along those same lines. And again, this is an independent activity. So once you teach kids how to do this, this can be a sort of a completely independent station that the kids cycle through if you are in the stations and centers. So there's 5 general steps to setting up a cover, copy, compare, but essentially you're wanting the student to state the problem with the answer, look at, cover it up, look at it, say it again, check themselves. So that's kind of what we're looking. They read the fact, they cover it up, they say it, or they write it, and then they check it. That's essentially what we are wanting them to do. If they miss it, they repeat that step. So they're going to have a piece of paper that has the fact and the answer. So the kids will look at that, read it out loud, say it silently. Then they will cover it up, say it, write it, and then they'll check it. And then if it's right, they move on. If it's wrong, they repeat that process. And I have a video that I'll show you of this too. The nice thing about cover, copy, compare is besides independent, there are all kinds of resources available for free at various places. And then there's lots of YouTube videos of teachers demonstrating it. But again, here's our familiar cycle that we're looking for. Is they look at it. There's your opportunity number 1. So remember, multiple opportunities. So they're looking at the fact and they're saying it. So that's the opportunity 1. Then they cover it up and they either write it or say it. There's your opportunity number 2. They look at it. There's their feedback. And they get the 3rd opportunity right there. So this activity has 3 opportunities embedded in it. The first time, when they write it or say it, and when they check it. It also has a feedback piece in there. So again, this is the loop that we're looking for. So multiple opportunities on the same fact in one practice session. So I have a video here that I'm going to show. So in this particular video, you'll see that the facts are written vertically. A lot of teachers say, is there a difference between vertical and horizontal? No, there isn't, even though teachers will say the kids can't do it vertical, horizontal. When you read the fact out loud, it doesn't matter whether it's vertical or horizontal, it's the same. But this can be done either way. All right, now a couple things here with what we just watched. So notice it was mixed facts. So we hadn't really got into mixed facts. So this is probably a little bit older kid that are set up for a kid in grades 4, 5, or 6, where the teacher is wanting to practice all of the facts. But again, you have multiple opportunities built in there, and you have a correction procedure for the feedback that's built in there. Would it be best to use the same model of 3 to 4 note? Yeah, so okay, good. That's what I was just going to get to. The way that sheet is designed is not, they did not do the chunking element of the 3 to 4. Now, so cover, copy, compare is kind of its separate strategy versus incremental rehearsal, right? They're kind of 2 different strategies. But what I said earlier is those components of incremental rehearsal can actually, and I encourage it, to be used with cover, copy, compare. So that same sheet could have been set up with 8 + 1 = 9 3 times as one of the facts that are chunked in there. So yes, to Evelyn, to your question, but it doesn't have to be. But I would encourage it for your more intensive students. That chunk is very, very beneficial. And then we have Sarah. So if the child only writes the answer and not the problem, it would be incorrect. So there are some variations. There's variations on that. All right. I think if that's a tier, if this is a kid that is not struggling, just a typical above average kid, I think I would be okay with the student just writing the answer. However, if you got kids that are struggling, there is something beneficial about saying or writing the entire fact sentence with the answer. So I would say, I would encourage them to write it. I don't know if I'd count it wrong. I would just teach the student to write the fact in this example. Does that make sense, Sarah? I wouldn't say he's wrong, but I would just say, now I want you to write the entire sentence. There's something about them seeing 3, 4, 12, 3, 4, 7, writing, saying it, that is solidifying it cognitively within their processing. So I would say it's not wrong, but I would correct them to write it. Now, what's a disadvantage of cover, copy, compare? It's got the multiple opportunities. Now, when I say multiple opportunities, they're seeing 8 plus 1, they're covering it, they're writing it. So that's 2 opportunities. And then they're seeing again 3. So they had 3 opportunities right there. There's a correction procedure, but what is one potential pitfall for cover, copy, compare if it's an independent, the students are kind of doing independently? Well, they're gonna get the feedback when they see it, right or wrong. This is kind of a biggie. This is one you have to watch for as a teacher. If you're not watching the kid do this, possible cheating, yes. Easy to skip, yes, yes, yeah. All those are correct, but that's not what I'm looking for. Is you don't know if they're writing the answer in that 2-second range. So they could look at 8 plus 1 equals 9, cover it up, and then they could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plus 1 is 9, and then they write 9. You get the paper back that you don't know how they got the answer. You just see 8 plus 1. So you do have to, it has to be monitored a little bit. So that's one disadvantage. The advantage is they can kind of do it on their own, but you're going to have to teach them what you're wanting them to do. Anybody see another disadvantage? I mean, all of those, like the cheating, the skipping, all those can be, but think about automaticity. Is there any other disadvantage that might come into play here by writing it? There is one, writing versus saying. So this exact same strategy can be done without the kid writing it. So the kid looks at 8 plus 1 equals 9, covers it up and says 8 plus 1 equals 9, checks it, gets it right. Julia nailed it. Writing there is slower, so they're going to get through less facts. You actually get through more facts with the not writing it. So there's again, what I'm trying to point out is there's not like a perfect way to do this. You have to monitor it, and there's variations with this. But that's cover, copy, compare. Now, Fraction decimals for sure. Simplifying. Ooh, area formulas. That's good. What formula would you use for this area? I like that. Integers. Yeah, that's a good one for sure. There's really, as you start going down the fluency automaticity path, just remember not everything needs to be automatic. Not everything needs to be fluent, but there are certain things that make other things in math a little bit more accessible when we are fluent with them. All right, so cover, copy, compare. It's a real simple strategy to use. There's a little setup like anything. You have to have those forms set up for the kids. Some teachers type them, some teachers just handwrite them. Some teachers have the kids write in the facts. So the teacher writes the 4 facts on the board and the kids write them in. Either any of those work. It's a technique that has some research support to kind of, again, moving kids from relying on strategies to a little bit more on the mental math side. It's not a new strategy by any means. It's been around a while, but sometimes the oldies are the goodies as far as that goes. But we're going to move on to the next one. Now, as I move on to the next one, the cover, copy, compare, and the incremental rehearsal have been really focused on the facts, basic facts. Those are probably my top 2 for single digit facts. These next 2, you could certainly do single digit, but these next 2 are going to be for other things that we want. And they're also nice, simple activities that the kids actually really like. But any questions on cover, copy, compare? It's a pretty straightforward strategy. All right, so the next one, check on my time. All right, good. These next 2 are very simple, and the best way for me to do these is to actually show you, have you do it with me. So we're going to do the math dash activity. So in the back of your hand, if you printed out your handouts and you have paper copies, find the handout towards the end that looks like this here, what you're seeing on the screen. If you don't have it, just get a piece of scratch paper. So we're going to do this activity, but what I want you to envision with this is I'm giving you paper, but think about kids with a dry erase board. So all your kids have a dry erase board with a marker in front of them, and the problems are going to show up on the screen. So I want to sort of give you that. Now, this is where. All right. So what's going to happen in here in a second is you're going to see 3 boxes show up on my screen. The box on the left highlighted in yellow. There'll be a box highlighted in like pink, and then there's a box highlighted in green. If you are in a teacher of grades K, 1 or 2, Mark, can you put this in the chat for me? If you are K, 1 or 2, I want you to do the yellow box. If you are 3, 4, or 5, I want you to do the pink box. And if you're over that, I want you to do the green box. So yellow is K1, 2, pink is 3, 4, 5, and green is everybody else. If you're K1, 2, you're going to answer this yellow box. Pink is the middle box, grades 4, 5, and 6, and then everybody else is green. All you have to do is write down the answer to the problem. The problems are only going to be up there for a couple of seconds. So you have to write the answer and then get ready for the next problem. We're going to do this twice. You're going to do the same box twice. The goal is that you answer more than you did the first time. All right. So here we go. The problem's only going to show up for a couple of seconds. You got to write the answer, and then another problem is going to show up. So here we go. Sorry. Here we go. All right, check your answers. Okay, so that was round one. Now, notice I'm not asking how many you got. I just said that was round one. Now for round two, you're going to answer the same box. And your goal is to try to answer more correct than you did the first time. Everybody got that? So fold your paper and cover up the answers you just wrote. Or if you have a dry erase board, erase your answers. And we will do it again. All right, here we go. Check your answers. Now, here's the question you ask your students. How many of you got the same or more correct the second time? So the kids will raise their hand, whoever did that. Now notice, this is really important. I'm not asking how many you got right. I'm differentiating. So the kids only have to beat themselves. So let's say that you have a class that has super fluent kids and then really slow kids. If I got one right the first time, the second time I only have to get two right to raise my hand. So this is, kids actually love this game because they're trying to beat themselves. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, why do I have three different skills up there? And I assign kids to certain ones. Why do I have three different boxes up there? Yes, I agree. Sprints has two sides. Different kids on different levels. That's right. So I can do, now I just randomly said K1 to, you would assign kids based on their need. So this activity actually does two of the most difficult things in differentiating instruction. Is it's giving the same activity on three different skills, and I'm differentiating success. So again, if you got one, all you got to do is get two the second time. If you got three, you got to get four the second time. And you're not going to ask the kids, how many did you get, Shannon? How many did you get, Marianne? Because now they're going to feel anxiety if they are on the slow side. So this is a great warm-up. Sarah put this in. This could be a great warm-up. Now you would do this same activity 3 or 4 days in a row. Maybe it's on the same activity for a week. So what you've decided is, you know what, I have kids that they know rounding, they're good at, they're at odd and even and they're converting, but I want them to do a little bit more mental math, become a little bit more fluent. So they're already accurate. I just want them to be more mentally savvy, more quickly on the mental side. So I do this activity. Now, I didn't time it like you have 10 seconds to answer this, but I did time it because I only put the problems on the screen for a couple of seconds. Now, how many seconds you put it on the screen, you kind of have to determine that. But don't have the mindset that I have to keep it up there long enough for everybody to solve it. You actually want it to be faster than the kids can solve. And that way they'll work up a little bit of speed. Now, you don't want it like super fast that they can't get any of the answers, but you don't want it up there for 30 seconds. Now, to do this activity, you have to have problems that are fairly quick to solve. So you can't do like a 6-step order of operation problem. This isn't going to work with word problems. But I've seen this with a lot of different things. Probably one of the coolest activities I saw this with was angle relationships with parallel lines and a transversal. So that just picture with me on the screen, parallel line with transversals, and angles were numbered. So what the teacher did is slide 1 circled 2 angles. And the kids have to say, oh, those are vertical. Over here, oh, those are adjacent. Those are alternate interior. And that's what the kids were writing down on their dry erase board. And they did that twice, and they started to get faster at recognizing the angles. Now, why is that important? It's not really important to recognize the angle fast, but if you recognize the angles without having to do a lot of use your cognitive resources, that's going to allow you then use that information to solve whatever the problem is. So sometimes with fluency, I like teachers to kind of view some of these things in math are kind of like sight words. Yes, I want you to know what they mean. I want you to know how to use them, why you use them, all the understanding piece. But then you just need to use them without having to think about all those things. So that is one activity. Now, I think I have one at the high school. Shall we try one at the high school level? You up for the challenge? Anybody up for the challenge? Get some rid of this stuff. So I'll let you pick which box. The first box is going to be solving a one-step equation. The green box is simplifying square roots. And the pink box on the right is integers. So I'll let you pick which one. Now remember, if I'm doing this with these skills, I've already taught the kids how to do it. They understand it. They've got strategies, techniques. I'm just trying to help them do more mental math. Are we ready? Here we go. All right, check your answers. Now I went a little bit fast there. I'm guessing some of you didn't get them all answered, which is fine. Again, think a dry erase board. Okay, class, wipe away your answers. Let's try it again. Here we go. All you got to do is write the answer down. Try to get more than you did the first time. All right. And then the question you ask is how many got more than they did the first time? That's the key. If you start saying, how many did you get? How many did you get? Then now it's an anxiety provoking activity because they're being compared to their peers. What's great about this is the kids are just trying to beat themselves. Now I have 3 up here. Maybe you don't do 3. Maybe you do 1. Maybe you do 2. So I'm just giving you an example here of the different ways to do it. Kids love this activity. Now that activity took what? A couple minutes. So it's not a long activity, can be fit in. A whole lot of things apply for that. So let's look at what are the elements in this activity. All right. Are you seeing the PowerPoint, Mark?
Yeah.
All right. So here's the steps for Math Dash. And it's really just these first. Oops. So explain fluency and the purpose. So, you've talked to the kids, say, all right, so we've been learning about these things. You guys are pretty accurate. You have these strategies, but some of these things I want us to do a little bit more mentally, mental math, fluent. So we get a little faster with this. So the skills that you pick should be things that the kids are 85 to 90% accurate with. So accuracy is not an issue if they're just doing all these strategies. 8 to 10 problems on a PowerPoint or Google slide. You display the problems one at a time for a predetermined. So do your best guess. All right, I'm going to display these for 3 seconds, and then I'm going to move on, or 2 seconds. The idea is that you're not leaving them up there long enough that every single kid does. You're wanting to pressure them a little bit to kind of push them to do some mental math. Only one problem at a time. You can differentiate. display the answer. So you run through it, display the answer, and then you do it a second time right there. I wouldn't go past 3 times. I would do it 2 times in one class, and I would do it for 3 to 5 days. Now, some teachers want to move the problems in different order. You can change all that, but the kids are practicing the same skill for 3 to 5 days. Then the next week they go on to a different set of skills, and then they go on to a different set of skills. And it's just kind of this building this mental math across time. So you always hear mental math. We want mental math, but we kind of just tell the kids, you need to just do this mental. And we're not really giving them kind of some of these ways to help facilitate that transfer. So there's basically, 6 steps. I will say teachers that do this, the kids really like this activity. They enjoy it. So anytime you got kids enjoying something in math, I think that's a positive. So that's called Math Dash. Now, the next activity is called Method of Repeated Calculation, MRC. Now, I sort of borrowed, I guess is a good way to say it. I borrowed this technique from reading. Method of repeating reading. I do not have a video with kids on this one for either of these two, Sammy. For method of repeated calculation, I borrowed the procedure for method of repeated reading. So method of repeated reading was a technique developed at Harvard to help kids to help develop fluency in reading. So in reading, what you do is you find a reading passage that the kid can read fairly accurately. So you want it around their instructional level or actually at their mastery level. So they're not making a lot of errors or having to decode a lot of words. And they have 2 minutes and they start reading and they read for 2 minutes and then they circle the last word they read. So that's considered what's called the cold read. Then you have the kids go back to the beginning and they have 2 minutes or a minute and they read the same passage again with the goal of trying to read as many or more words. So now that's the warm read. So cold read, warm read. I think if you teach reading, you're familiar with those cold, hot kind of read. So you do that 2 or 3 times. That begins to develop the fluency because they're getting multiple opportunities to read the same words. So I've taken those and I've sort of put them into math. So instead of a reading passage, you give them a practice sheet full of math problems. And they have 1 minute to see how many they can get. And there's more problems on there than they can answer. And you tell them, hey, there's more than we can answer on this. We're going to do this twice. Your goal is to try to get more the second time. So in your packet at the end, this is a little harder to do via Zoom, but you're going to give the kids a worksheet. So I just said simplifying fractions for this one, but this could be integers. It could be addition facts. This is close to the sprints in Eureka, but they're going to have a cold and a hot opportunity. So the cold is the first time, the hot is the second time. And notice, and I want to point this out. Just like in the reading, it's the same problems in the same order. So they're going to simplify in the same order. So they're going to start at the first problem. They can either work down or across, but they have to do it the same way both times. So what I tell them what to do. I say, start at this first one. When I say begin, you're going to simplify as many of these as you can going across the page. If you come to one you don't know, you can skip it, but you are not to scan the whole page and find the ones you know and simplify. You have to go in order. But if you get stuck on one, you can skip to the next one. You're going to have 1 minute. Now listen, there's more problems on this page than you can do. There's more than I can do in a minute. You're not going to finish it. That's not the point. The point is you're going to answer as many as you can correctly. And we're going to do this twice. And you're going to try to beat the number that you have the second time. So they say begin, and they start working through it. When the minute's up, you say stop, tell them to put a bracket. Then you display the answers on the board, and the kids check their answers, and then they tally up the number they got right. So they say, okay, I got 12. Write that answer down, 12. Now flip the page over. Notice it's the same problems. You got, however many you got the first time, you need to try to get that many or more. Now, I'd like to do this with you, but you kind of need to find that sheet in your packet. So if you printed them off, find that packet. If not, maybe you can, I suppose, I'm just curious, thumbs up if you have a hard copy of your packet. There's not a ton of thumbs. If you don't have the hard packet, okay, so if you don't have a paper copy of this one, can you at least see it electronically on your end? So you either need to have the paper copy or at least see it on your screen electronically. All right, so let's do this activity. So you're my class, get your paper copy out if you have paper. If not, get it showing on your screen, and then a piece of scratch paper to write. I'm going to give you 1 minute to start simplifying fractions. My timer ready. So you're going to start on 4/24, simplify it, and then move across the page, left to right, answer as many as you can. Don't worry. I don't care if you don't answer all of them. There's too many on here for us to answer. I just want to see how many we can get in a minute, and we'll try to do it a second time. We're going to do this twice, see if you can beat yourself the second time. Everybody good? All right, I'm going to start the timer. Ready? Now, obviously, this is hard to do because I'm not seeing people, but ready, begin. All right, stop. Now, I would, again, if I'm with you, I would display the answers and have the kids check them. So I'm just going to assume you got them right. All right, so count up the number you answered and write that at the top and circle it. Notice I'm not asking how many each individual student got. That's not the point here. This is how you de-stress fluency activities. Now, it was timed, but I'm not testing. It's a practice. All right, now, so displayed the answers. Everybody got theirs at the top. All right, flip over. You'll see it's the same set of problems. All right, so I want you to start at the same problem, 4/24, and work across the paper. You have to work across the paper. I want you to try to answer the same amount or more than you did the first time. And ready, begin. And stop. Now, again, I would display the answers, but I'll assume you got them all right. Count them up. And then in the chat or a thumbs up, how many of you got more or at least the same as you did on the first try? Now I'm seeing lots of mores in the chats, lots of thumbs. Now, again, this is hard to do via Zoom. When I'm there and I can see you, I can see you going faster the second time. Did you feel you went faster the second time? Because that's the sense you want with this. And kids can actually feel they went faster. Now, some teachers, well, they're just memorizing it. Well, yeah, that's the whole point of this, is they're trying. So I got a lot of mores on there. Notice I did not ask anybody how many they got. Do not say, Sarah, how many did you get? Shannon, how many did you get? Because now they're comparing to their peers. And that is what we don't want. So this idea of like fluency and automaticity causing all this anxiety. It's because of how we're doing it, not really fluency and automaticity. It's what we're doing with it. Now, this is one that the kids, so Math Dash, the problems are on the screen and they're just writing it on a dry erase board. In this activity, they really need to have the paper in front of them. Don't do it the way I had you do it, because kids are going to have to go from one plane to the next plane, and there's a whole bunch of problems up there. They're going to mess it up. The Math Dash is okay to do it that way because there's only one showing up. So this one they have to have in front of them. So a lot of teachers, what they do is they'll put the paper into sleeves, those plastic sleeves, and the kids write with dry erase markers, and then they can just wipe them away. But the kids need to have that in front of them. All right. So I see some people are saying I got 5 more. I just hope that, or I wish I was there, because I'm hoping that you sensed yourself that you went faster that second time. And that's sort of building some behavior momentum. The kids feel it. That's motivating. These 2 activities are actually very motivating for students because they are beating themselves and they're seeing the success. Plus, you can make it specific to the student. All right. All right. Are we back on the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. So here are the steps for this. Again, you want to explain fluent. This is really important if you have kids that have anxiety just in general, or you're really low kids, because if you give that kid that whole worksheet of fractions in front of them, that some of them are going to panic because they think they have to answer them all. So make sure up front you explain the activity. Hey, there's more on here than you can answer. I don't care about you answering more. I want to see if you can beat yourself both times. From the first to the second. And that is what kids can get attracted to. I say 30 problems. I mean, it depends on the skill set you need. You just have to have more than what they can do. Students are given 1 minute to solve as many problems as they can, 2 opportunities, and you would do the same set multiple days in a row. Now, this is where I want to kind of do a little bit. I just pulled a worksheet off the internet to show you this. So there were fractions on there that were kind of weird. I would zero in on like making these all halves, 3, like the anchor benchmark fractions, make them a little more focused than what I did. But integers, people who use Eureka Math should see some parallels here with sprints and how to use them. The idea is that cold and hot read is an excellent way to build students' momentum. All right, so I don't know, we're getting close. Instead of doing breakout activities, I'll just stop here and have open it up to some questions about the Math Dash or the method of repeated calculation. The Math Dash activity, both of these require a little bit of upfront planning. But what's nice is once you make the Math Dash activities, you can just keep using them. Same with the method of repeated calculation. A lot of teachers do this with partners. So like the whole grade level, like ideally all the 5th grade teachers would get together and say, what are the top 10 skills that we want our 5th graders to be able to do mental math? Have that discussion, they come up with 10. Then they divide those 10 into the teachers and say, okay, I'm going to make 5 math activities with these. I'm going to make method of repeated calculation activities with these. And then all of a sudden they have all those skills set and they share them, and then they're set for the year. That's the best way to use the Math Dash and the method of repeated calculation is kind of at a grade level team planning meeting. What are the 5 to 10 skills that our kids would benefit from being fluent to automatic with? And then divide and conquer is the best way. Once they're made, and then you can keep using them. The interventionist should get access to them. And you can also use them across grade levels. So let's say you got some really sharp kids in 3rd grade. Maybe they need some fourth grade skills because you're accelerating them. So they kind of go across grade levels. But both of those activities, what we see in the schools is the kids like doing them. So this is a great way to start off your math class on a positive note and get the kids moving forward. But as we're sort of coming to a close, wrapping things up today, I just want to highlight a couple of things. As you process the content from today, really view this in terms of a cognitive rationale. The reason fluency to automaticity is an important part of learning is it frees up working memory. That is the key justification for this. Second, there are 4 stages that you really want to view things through: understanding, relationship, fluency, and automaticity. And those are grade level dependent and very, very important to pay attention to. We don't rush to automaticity. And then when you're thinking about how to develop or set up activities, again, I don't care what the activities are. We went through kind of like a flashcard practice, cover, copy, compare, math dash, and method of repeated calculation. All of those had those 3 key elements, which was multiple opportunities, a targeting through a chunk, and feedback. So questions that folks might have, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Mark probably has another form for evaluation, but I'm going to close it out, thanking everyone for coming to this. I think it's great that you came on your own time to learn about fluency. I hope you're leaving with a deeper understanding of fluency and some strategies and ways to tweak what you're doing to get them better aligned from a cognitive perspective. And with that said, I'll hang out here if anyone has any questions or comments as we move into enjoying your summer.